I've never been interviewed like this.
Oh, no.
Is there plenty of time for you to do that? Yes.
Honest, I do not know where they are at. That is the God's honest truth.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to walk you through November, but I'm going to take you to a date that's probably pretty fresh in your mind, the day that Marie Fran's coma. Do you remember how you found out?
Jim asked a short question, but rather than giving a short answer, Russell gives a prolonged answer. He repeats some of the same information, adds new information to the question, makes significant pauses, and uses interjections as hesitation markers. Overall, he complicates an uncomplicated question. Unwillingly, he shows that the question's problematic for him, even though it shouldn't be.
I do. Yeah, I was sent an email. Well, as soon as the ops staff and the base learned, they told me.
Okay.
So I got an email. I can't remember if it was late at night, early in the morning. It was certainly. I saw it. I want to say first thing in the morning because I had just come back from Ottawa. I was in Ottawa for a set of meetings on one of the days. I can't remember what day of the week we're talking about, but yeah, no, I mean, obviously when your people gets killed, it gets your attention. So.
Absolutely.
This is Russell fighting with himself, and cleverly, Jim keeps quiet and lets it happen.
I very much remember that coming in.
And how did you know Marie Fran's coma?
I'd only met her once. She was on a crew I was on just after I got to the base.
Okay.
So I can't even remember. I think it was a one-day trip. I did a number of trips in Canada transporting our troops, sort of first leg out of Edmonton. We tend to hopscotch them across until they get into theatre. So anyway, I can't remember which trip it was, but we did a number of them out to Edmonton just to pick up the troops, bring them to Trenton, and then put a fresh crew on, and because we'd fly out and back in the same day, so pushing the edge of that, and fresh crew on, and then continue on after a couple hour delay.
Okay.
Jim asked how Russell knew Marie France, but Russell makes a verb switch. Instead of know, he says met, and thus answers a slightly different question. Starting with,
I'd only met her once.
It's a self-protective strategy, indicating that apparently Russell's very much self-aware of how he answers this particular question. Furthermore, it's worth noting that he details the trip. He doesn't give details about Marie France. Talking about the trip buys him more time to think, and is obviously more comfortable for him. In interrogations, guilty subjects will often elaborate on so-called safe points, points that are more or less irrelevant, but that help them calm down.
Now, you got that email notifying you that something had happened.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of a clear recollection as to how your schedule was going that week?
Well, I can't remember what day that the message came in. Just a second. No, I can't remember the day of the week. No, I'm sorry, I can't remember what day that was, but...
If Russell can remember, he can remember. There's nothing to apologize for unless there's something he's not telling. This is a clear-cut example of why unmotivated apologies in these situations should always be noted as a sign of guilty knowledge.
So, I think what happened... No, sorry, just a second.
The next passage, revealing. Notice Russell's serious attempt at humor.
So if we were to do a similar investigation in your background, is there anything you can think of that anybody may have misinterpreted, or anything in your history that somebody might say Russell Williams
Absolutely.
did this?
No,
Okay.
be very boring.
What's that?
It'll be very boring.
All right, because essentially that's what I'm looking at. Is it?
Russell indicates that his life's boring. Self-critique in a situation like this is noted. Doesn't matter if it's said jokingly. It's almost exclusively used for self-protective and thus self-serving reasons. What's more interesting, though, is the lack of alignment between the detective's laugh and Russell's facial expression. In a conversation between two speakers or more, a high level of mirroring is expected. If one person laughs, the other person laughs, or at least smiles.
All right,
Russell doesn't. He's no longer smiling as he was in the beginning.
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before?
I have never been interviewed like this.
Oh no? Okay.
Something's changed in the conversation. Again, this isn't the detective's doing. He's merely asking questions. By not reacting accordingly, Russell points to this perceived change himself.
Can I assume you're going to be discreet?
It's possible. Yeah.
Because, this would have a very significant impact on the base if they thought you thought I did this.
Russell says,
If they thought you thought I did this.
we note the last words, I did this. He's relating himself to the crimes, and he doesn't deny the detective's suspicions. This isn't the language of an innocent person.
If there's any communication or contact between you and Jessica Lloyd, you've seen her picture, right, around town?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Ever seen her before?
I don't. No, I would say I have not.
Okay. All right.
Russell's modification's interesting. He was asked if he'd ever seen her before, and he answers,
I don't. No, I would say I have not.
Okay.
he doesn't simply say, no, I haven't. He says, would say, which is a weak denial, opening for the possibility that he has in fact seen her before. His body language indicates that he's getting more and more uncomfortable.
You remember what you would have done that evening to get to Ottawa for that meeting? Like, would it be...
I drove to Ottawa in the morning of the day of my meeting, so if it was the Tuesday, then I would have left Tweed. It was a very foggy morning
Okay.
that morning.
Shortly after this investigation started, they identified those tires as the same tires on your Pathfinder.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
This is incriminating information, and Russell's initial reaction is not to deny this, but to simply say,
Really?
Yeah.
an innocent person is expected to have a strong emotional reaction to this, typically in form of anger.
Is there any reason at all you can think of why Marie-France Como would have specifically referenced you in some of her writings?
Not at all.
No?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
In regards to body language, Russell visibly exaggerates his surprise. He then says,
No, absolutely not.
with a dramatized chuckle. Again, this is overemphasis, indicators of an unreliable denial.
Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house.
It's hard to believe this is happening.
Or like, do you have a sweater I can borrow or something? I don't have any sweaters.
So you remember me,
Of course I do.
but you were on the 15 for a while, and you ended up getting off the 15 somewhere.
Yeah, I looked at a map and I'm pretty sure I know where I went. Can I draw you a map?
Most people would know where they went. Jodi prefaces a possible knowledge with the hedge pretty sure. The function of hedges is to indicate uncertainty rather than certainty. They offer a deceptive person leeway to modify or retract a statement at a later point without directly contradicting said statement. Again, she's trying to control the interview. Also, drawing a map gives her additional time to think.
Sure.
Because I eventually started seeing signs for Phoenix, and I was like, and it was several hundred miles away still. I was like, that's weird. Where am I going? So you have California, Los Angeles, and Nevada, Arizona, Utah. And I was supposed to go somewhere right up here. Oh, I'm a lefty. So the 15 kind of does one of these.
Yeah. Goes through, let's say, Las Vegas right here.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, my
No,
math
that's
is so
okay.
wrong.
That's okay.
She's being playful here, an uncharacteristic trait for an innocent person. She apologizes again. This time it's for the map she herself insisted on drawing. She makes herself sound dumber than she is in an obvious attempt to suck up to the detective. Notice she wanted to draw the map and sounded sure she could do it. But now that she's failed, it's evident that she was stalling. Hence, she engages in unreliable self-criticism here. It's understood that most people, especially in an interview like this, refrain from criticizing themselves unless it has a self-beneficial purpose and/or they know they're lying. Jodi's quick to admit that her map is wrong. This quick admission suggests that she knew the map was going to be wrong by the time she asked to draw it, just a moment earlier. Furthermore, she over-dramatizes her supposed surprise. Linguistically, drawing the map ends up damaging her case more than if she hadn't, even though her intentions were the exact opposite.
The 40 runs somewhere this way, because somehow I ended up on the 40. And when I saw the 40, I'm like, the only thing I associate with the 40 is Flagstaff, and Flagstaff is somewhere north of
Flagstaff is
Utah.
right up here.
I mean, northern Arizona. And so, and I was going east, and I was like, what's going on here? I wasn't going the right way. And so I've had, for the last 2 years, I've had a car that has a GPS system in it. It's really good, and I think it hasn't served me as far as getting a sense of direction. When I moved to Palm Desert.
Indirectly, Jodi makes a cunning excuse for her unassertive explanations, her alleged bad sense of direction. Likewise, mentioning the GPS system gives her something else to talk about, at least momentarily. She's very self-aware of her language. The self-awareness results in self-serving statements that remove responsibility from her.
Yeah, you kind of rely on it a little too much.
Too much. In fact, when I moved in with the last place I lived in Arizona, I did not know how close it was to Travis. I didn't realize. I have a very bad sense of direction, and it wasn't until I used my GPS the whole time I was there, pretty much, just to find things. Anyway, so I got back. I looked at the MapQuest that I MapQuest a bunch of places. I was maybe going to go to Death Valley.
Jodi parrots the interviewers too much. Parroting is the easy way out, and in this case she's parroting a slight criticism of herself, which points to an unreliable statement. She removes herself from Travis and the crime. Notice the subtle way she inserts this utterance, prefacing it with the intensifying in fact. On a surface level, she may seem easygoing, but she's still highly self-protective. There's vowel stress on not, and there's no contraction. Between the lines, she's telling us that this information is sensitive, important for her to get across. Deceptive people often emphasize what they know is a lie. Paradoxically, it's this emphasis that ends up giving them away, because why the need to bring it up at this point? Also, the fact that she's formulating this as an unmotivated negative statement points to deception. She's the one bringing attention to something that she didn't know. Unmotivated negative formulations bring attention to the very thing they're trying to negate. I say unmotivated because if the detective had asked her, "Did you know how close it was to Travis?" she could have made the reliable denial, "No, I didn't." This is not the case here. We observe her excuse again. Apparently, repetition of this piece of information, first indirectly and now directly, is important to Jodi. especially as the walls are closing in around her.
If you slept for 10 hours,
I only slept for about
here
8
and
hours.
here, it would still leave 18 some odd hours for something else. Were you at Travis's house on Wednesday?
Absolutely not. I was
fourth.
nowhere near Mesa.
What if I could show you proof you were there? There's pictures. And I know you know there's pictures because I have them. Why did you choose to go visit Travis that day? And why did you do what you did?
I never
Why,
heard
Jodi?
Travis.
Jodi doesn't say, "I didn't hurt Travis," thereby denying the specific action. She says, "never." Never is a general and distancing expression that's commonly associated with unreliable denials. And since Jodi's not denying the specific action, this is an unreliable denial. Also, hurt should be noted as a euphemism. Euphemisms are frequently applied by deceptive people to minimize the harm they've caused and simultaneously present themselves in a more favorable light.
I can just arrest you and throw you in jail, but I want to know why. Why did you do this to him?
I wouldn't hurt Travis. He's done so much for me.
The detective's letting Jodi know it's too late for her to make excuses. Jodi has changed never to wouldn't, which is also distancing. The interesting thing about this verb choice is that wouldn't doesn't exclude that Jodi did hurt Travis. The person could potentially have done something to another person that they wouldn't do. Didn't and wouldn't are not mutually exclusive. This is an even more unreliable denial.
If you want, I can show you some pictures of him. Do you want to see pictures of him?
Part of me does and part of me doesn't.
Why? Because you don't want to remember?
No,
Jodi.
There's a morbid curiosity.
This statement is inconsistent with her supposedly feeling sad. This isn't the typical expression a person would use if they were indeed crying over a lost loved one. Therefore, she doesn't fake cry because of Travis. She fake cries because she knows she's exposed. This is another futile attempt to sound sincere and fish for sympathy.
Listen, if I'm found guilty, I don't have a life. I'm not guilty. I didn't hurt Travis. If I hurt Travis, if I killed Travis, I would beg for the death penalty.
Even though she makes 3 conditional clauses with if, this passage is an admission of guilt. First, she uses the word guilty, showing the detective that it's been on her mind, that her denials and pointless questions have been attempts to protect herself, to avoid the consequences of confessing. Second, she distinguishes between the verbs hurt and kill. So, first we hear the euphemism hurt again, and then the real verb, killed. By placing herself in this context, she's letting us know what she did. Additionally, these conditional clauses don't occur in a reliable context, saying she would beg for this punishment. Jodi doesn't need a lie detector test. Her own language incriminates her.
And it's like, I was, when all my friends like were coming over to give me some support, I knew that like, all right, like I was happy all my friends just came over to just support. I didn't want to be alone at that point in time. Like this is the time you don't want to be alone at all.
Firstly, notice how Tammy's momentary lack of attention gets Chris to look at her and start over with his story.
And it's like, I was, when all my friends like were coming over to give me some support, I knew that like, all right, like I was happy all my friends just came over to just.
Thus, he shows that he's more aware of her reaction to the story than actually telling the story. Tammy's short reaction obviously confuses him, and he reinitiates the story with "all right," as if this is a state of mind he now has to resume, exactly as if this was an act. Secondly, he uses the qualifier at that point in time.
I didn't want to be alone at that point in time.
In statement analysis, it's understood that subjects inadvertently tell what's really on their mind. That's why we look for qualifiers like these. He He doesn't simply state, "I didn't want to be alone," but that he didn't want to be alone at that point in time. This formulation is interesting because not wanting to be alone was a very recent emotion. His family has almost just disappeared at the time of this interview, but the qualifier at that point in time indicates that he's already overcome this emotion, that there was actually no point in time where he didn't want to be alone, that he wanted to be alone this entire time. Thirdly, he started correctly with the use of the pronoun I, but he then shifts to the distancing you when generalizing his alleged emotion.
It's like, this is the time you don't want to be alone at all.
This is a pattern in Chris's FBI and CBI interviews that I've pointed out in previous videos. Chris is so far removed from how he should be feeling personally that he overemphasizes with general formulations. Here he even adds "at all" as an overemphasis. It's as if he knows that what he can express for himself using the pronoun I is not going to convince the agents, probably because he himself doesn't consider it convincing, because he knows it's a lie. Let's keep watching the same passage. Notice how quiet Tammy is. She lets Chris keep trying to convince her that he wants to find his family. The interesting thing is that when Chris is met by silence, he continues overemphasizing his alleged good intentions. This comes across as trying too hard, and it's a red flag in police interviews. Furthermore, we note how he praises Agent Graham. Praise of law enforcement in a situation like this before a polygraph test is another red flag. A more common emotion for someone in Chris's situation is to think that law enforcement isn't doing enough.
And my friends are supporting me all through this, and I just want to find them. I want them to come home safe, like wherever they are, I hope they are safe. And I really hope they can just come home. The FBI agent, Graham, he's been really helpful. I mean, he didn't tell me what leads they have for today, but I'm hoping that it leads to them coming home. Because just being in that house and not being able to tuck them in, it's heart-wrenching, it's earth-shattering right now, because those are my kids.
He says, "I just want to find them." Just is a dependent word used to compare the thought the subject expresses with another thought which they don't express, the opposite thought. So Chris unwillingly tells us that he doesn't want to find them. He knows the personal consequences of finding them. Also, this should be absolutely unnecessary to convince anyone about, if in fact he were genuinely interested in finding them. Heart-wrenching and earth-shattering, aimed at persuasion, and for that exact reason, it's not persuasive.
If just earth-shattering, I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like
Chris continues with those, which is so consistent in these interviews that we can conclude that it's a way for him to distance himself from his actions, and thus his family, who reminds him of his actions.
Those are like you made those kids, you know, like, do you have kids or anything?
Like, you have to trust me and believe me. Like, I know you don't know me as a person. You've known me for like 2.5, 3 hours, and I don't know what your opinion is, but you have to realize that these two beautiful girls right here and my wife, I had nothing to do with the disappearance. I didn't hurt her.
Once again, Chris doesn't sound assertive. His voice is low-key, and he's using exhalations to sound sincere and to fish for the agent's understanding. Also, he introduces the word hurt, indicating that this word is sensitive to him.
I cheated on her. I hurt her emotionally. I cheated on her.
His multiple self-repairs and pauses have finally resulted in something that he thinks he can use. He repeats the word hurt here, presupposing that he did in fact hurt Shanann somehow, even though he just stated he didn't hurt her. Also, pay attention to his tone of voice.
I cheated on her. I hurt her emotionally. I cheated on her.
He sounds happy that he finally found this excuse. This is insincere and in direct contrast to his next statement, where he tries to sound sad and apologetic. Listen to this.
And I feel absolutely horrible about this.
Now he's using drawn-out speech for the sake of emphasis. He doesn't give new information, he just adds absolutely. which is recognized as an overly convincing linguistic element that is thus insincere. By now, it's clear that Chris's repetitions suggest rehearsal. He's rehearsing how to answer in the most convincing way.
That's what I've been holding back.
Under this type of pressure, a subject will often presuppose what they previously denied. Previously, Chris has denied that he's been holding back anything. He has claimed to be honest, but now he's willing to admit that he's been holding back something. This makes Chris look unreliable.
Yeah. When I didn't go to the Rocky game, I was with her. Okay. I went to dinner with her.
He will admit to anything else but the crime, it appears.
Okay, where are they? That I do not know. That was what I was holding back. Like, I didn't know, like, what I did. I know, Chris.
Notice that and the vowel stress on the sound. This is Chris manipulating the agents to think that he has given them sufficient information. He says it with the same unassertive low-key voice we observed earlier. Chris is using pathos, trying to invoke sympathy from the audience, to make the audience, Coda and Tammy, feel what he wants them to feel. Chris avoids contraction and thus tries to sound more assertive. But that's the thing, we can hear he's trying, it doesn't come naturally to him. Again, it should always be noted when the subject's suddenly willing to reveal more information and admit that they were in fact holding something back. In the vast majority of cases, this means that the subject's still hiding the most critical pieces of information.
In an interview today, you weren't asked about infidelity. You were asked about...
I was holding back from last night.
That's
when
why
you
you
talked
failed today.
I'll do whatever I can to help to find where they're at.
Phonetically, Chris is not being assertive and convincing here. He stresses can and at, which linguistically restricts his ability or desire to help. This doesn't sound like a man who's willing to do whatever he can, even though on a lexical level, this is the expression he uses. Also, he doesn't just say find them, he says find where they're at. He places his wife and children somewhere, so he shows knowledge about them being at a particular location.
I don't know where they're at.
Chris, right now your dad's outside. He flew across the country to help you.
I want to find them. I've told you over and over, I want to find everyone.
The breath in his voice is a strong appeal to be pitied. Chris makes a self-repair instead of completing the utterance. And this is the case in point. It's as if Chris thinks it's enough for him to tell how he allegedly feels. Truthful people are able to show how they feel because they're sincere and don't have to think about it. He's again using distancing language. He's unable to say their names, unable to say wife and daughters or children, even after a micropause before everyone. That he can't even use the proper names after a brief moment to think about his wording is a strong indicator of guilty knowledge.
Tell us about that night again, and please tell the truth.
I told you the truth. I promise I've told you the truth. Like, I woke up at 4 o'clock. I woke up at 4 o'clock. Got dressed, got ready. 4:15, me and Shannon talked. About the house, about separation.
Narrative balance is a concept in statement analysis where you compare the essentials to the non-essentials of a subject's narrative. We hear a 2-second pause followed by a self-repair where Chris shifts from we to I, and then there's a 3-second pause. At this point, Chris still hasn't told anything essential. He's rehearsing. This is not the language of a person speaking from experiential memory, or at the very least, entirely from experiential memory. Chris tries to give the impression that his memory is accurate. After a self-repair and 8 seconds of pause all in all, he finally gets to the so-called critical event, which is the most important part of a narrative, but only on a surface level. His prologue is longer than the critical event. This is a red flag that points to undisclosed information.